Level up your LA Kings experience with the new Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access. Enjoy great seats to the game along with premier dining inside the Lexus Club with all-you-can-eat food and non-alcoholic beverages. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings item and parking with your purchase. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn rewards on each purchase from the only ticket company that rewards you for buying. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings.
You're listening to an LA Kings podcast. For more episodes of this and every other Kings program, visit lakings.com/podcast.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings. Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
All right, joining me today to evaluate the goaltending for the LA Kings in the 2024-25 season, goaltending coach Mike Buckley. How are you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Jesse?
Good, thank you. Appreciate you joining us. So, we had you on, I think, in advance of the Four Nations tournament, and I had a bunch of goaltending questions. I'm going to start out with a vague goaltending question. The only numbers that I really know to look to for evaluating a goalie are goals against and save percentage. And I guess you can go to wins, but that's more of a team stat. Obviously, you must have much more sophisticated numbers than those two, yeah?
Yeah, yes and no. I think for me, the most important one is wins.
Mm-hmm.
You can look at goalies that have incredible save percentage and goals against and have a sub 500 record. And I would say all, especially in today's day and age, all goalie statistics are pretty much are team based. You have to have strong defensive structure in front of you to have the type of numbers that most of these guys have. But there are. I do not look at expected goals against or any of that. There's too many discrepancies. But I do look at rebound control percentage. I think that's an important number. I look at when goals are given up, what the score of the game is, save percentage, and say like a 1-0 game versus a 3-0 game. Look at how clutch the goalie is in those circumstances. So there are some other categories that I definitely look at for sure.
So given that knowledge, if I look at Darcy Kuemper's season, I can see, from the publicly available numbers, he's 31, 11, and 7. He had a .922 save percentage. He was a 2.02 goals against average, 5 shutouts. We know that he was a finalist for the Vezina Trophy. But without getting into specific stats and where he performs on them, well, you can if you want. But how strong a season did he have do all of his numbers across the board support that Vezina nomination from your perspective? Like, how happy were you with the season he had?
Yeah, very happy. I find his consistency was excellent. I would imagine if you look at, I haven't looked at it, but I would imagine his quality of start percentage was probably very high for the league. He not just the consistency in his play, but the moments that we needed him to step up in moments in games, small moments, big saves at the right times, and really situations where he kept us in games, gave us a chance to come back. He just checked every box, and I definitely think he's worthy of that Vezina nomination for sure.
Is leadership something that a goaltender? So obviously Kings fans and, Kings fans of my age range, the goaltender that we're all most familiar with, right, was Jonathan Quick, because he was here for over a decade. And, the concept of him as a leader is pretty well ingrained. How difficult is it for a goaltender to exert leadership on a group and versus, just being the extra guy at the back of the team?
Yeah, I think it comes naturally for certain guys. And a lot of it from the goalie perspective is leading by example, with your work ethic. your compete, your drive to just keep the puck out of the net. Guys see that. If you're a goalie who kind of just, especially in practice, just quits on pucks or quits on plays, and you're not giving 100% of the time, it doesn't bode well for the team in front of you, or for your own game for that matter. So that leadership and that accountability as a goalie is extremely important, and it's very, very relevant in the sport of hockey.
Now, this season, the LA Kings had an unbelievable home record, and on the road, I don't remember if it was sub 500 on the season, but if it wasn't sub 5, I think it was 31-6-4 at home, 17-9-5 on the road. And obviously a split like that is going to have an impact on the goaltenders. Darcy Kuemper, 11-8-5 on the road with a .909 save percentage and a 2.37 goals against. Now, I know that the coaching staff has not made any sort of public, and when I say public, I just mean like when Jim Hiller was asked about it, Jim Hiller said like, yeah, I don't know. We play better at home. It's the fans, whatever. And broadcasters have speculated and fans have speculated, but I haven't really seen any strong, really obvious theories to explain it. When a goaltender has, a better record at home versus on the road, is that, is the goaltender's play home on the road impacting the team, or is the team's play home on the road impacting the goaltender's record? Or is it a weird chemistry of both?
It's definitely both, for sure. It's like I mentioned earlier, today's day and age, goalies are less of a dominant figure in the outcome of a game. They're always going to have a significant impact on the outcome of a game, but the skill level of players in today's day and age, you got to be able to defend.
Can I interrupt and ask a follow-up question on that before we move on to the next thought? Is that true in the playoffs as well, or is that mainly just the regular season?
I'd say it holds true for both. I mean, okay. You need, if your team is not defending in the playoffs, and unless your goalie just catches absolute fire, but the level of the level that goalie has to be on in the playoffs is so much harder in today's modern game than it was even 10, 15 years ago. Not to say that goalies back then had it easy. They certainly didn't, but
sure.
It was certainly a different style of game, different style of play. Skill level wasn't hasn't improved as much as it is today, and it is incredible right now how much skill there is in this league, and goalies have to do a better job at catching up to that skill level and to having more of an impact. And some guys do. Darcy Kuemper definitely did. You see Connor Hellebuck at times has as well. Jake Ottinger in the playoffs right now is outstanding. So you're seeing guys do it, but you got to have that support in front of you. It's very, very hard for a goalie to just take a team like Jigger did back in the day and just stand on his head night after night and carry his team through the playoffs. Offense is so strong now.
Okay.
And then to answer your question with the road, I don't have an answer for that. I think that I will say this: our road schedule for Los Angeles Kings this year is very. We started off, I believe, on a 19-day road trip if you include the
Quebec. Yeah,
Quebec
it was a weird start. Yeah,
and then we had a 14-day road trip right before Christmas, and another 10-day after Christmas. So our road schedule this year was challenging, to say the least. And not to make excuses, we definitely have to be better on the road, but that can wear on you, and that can take a lot of practice time away from you. And it's not anyone's fault. It's just how the schedule worked out.
So I'm looking at Darcy Kuemper's numbers since he started getting significant playing time, which was in the 2018-19 season with Arizona.
Mhm.
His save percentages have been in subsequent years 925, 928, 907. The year that he won the Cup with Colorado, 921, 909, his first year in Washington. Last year, 890. And then this year, back to 922. Now, in his end of season media availability, he was very complimentary of you specifically. So I'm going to give you a chance to pat yourself on the back here. How much of that rebound in his, save percentage numbers is due to work that you did specifically with him, and how much of that was just him returning to form?
I think it was all him returning to his. I think he got away from things that made him successful as a goalie, and to go back to where we're at in the climate of goaltending, it's save percentage and goals against. Save percentage has gone down, goals against have gone up. If you go back to that 17-18 season, I believe the average save percentage in the league was close to 91.
Hmm.
And it's close to 90 now. So, if you look at where he was slightly above average at that time, and now he's well above average. And it's his him going back to what worked for him. Now, maybe I talked to him about a few of those things and helped him along the way, but a lot of that is him being open-minded and him knowing what he needs to do to get back to his game as a veteran goaltender.
When you're dealing with a National Hockey League team in a full 82-game season, you're obviously going to use more than one goaltender. You may use more than two. This year, the Kings used 4. David Riddick, 16-14-2. Erik Portillo, 1-0-0. And Phoenix Copley didn't get a decision in the game that he appeared in. The team finished, if I'm not mistaken, with the 6th best record in the NHL. So it's not like there were a lot of deficiencies in the team's performances. But what more could the Kings goaltending have provided this season?
I think there's probably been, if we really look at wins and losses and how many of those losses were a result of poor goaltending, I wouldn't say there was very many.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously in the course of a 82-game schedule, you are going to have games that your goaltender is subpar, and that could have lost you a goal or two, which cost you the game. I wouldn't say that happened very much this year. I think our goaltending was pretty consistent. David definitely got the tougher starts, given that he played nearly every back-to-back, and especially on the road. So, maybe just a little bit more consistency on the road, I guess, is what I would want from our goaltenders moving forward. And that's, we got to find a way to be better there. And certainly, we drew a tough opponent in the playoffs, and there was games where Kuemper was phenomenal, but there were also games where I think we could use that extra save, and I think every team can say the same thing in that regard about their goalie, especially, like I said, it's a team with so much firepower like Edmonton. So I would say, those two things. One would be just having a better record on the road, and being better in the playoffs.
If you, and there's multiple questions packed into this one, if it's a back-to-back situation, game 1 is against the last place team in the East. Game 2 is against, the Edmonton Oilers or another team that you're in a battle with for a playoff spot. And I'm defining those teams because I don't want to say a bad team and a good team, but that's what I'm really getting at. In a back-to-back situation, is your inclination to advise to play the starter against the weaker, less consequential opponent to try and secure those 2 points, or the opposite, to try and hold your starter for the bigger game, quote unquote?
honestly, we believe both our guys gives us a chance to win any
Okay.
game against any opponent. So a lot of times it comes down to um, just managing the starter's workload. How many games has Darcy played leading into that game? Has he played 4 or 5 starts in a row? Or so maybe we go with David against in that first game, or maybe he hasn't played that many, and that game goes to Kemps. But there is some logic into to win the winnables. They say
Mm-hmm.
win the ones you're supposed to win, get your best lineup in there, get the 2 points. But the truth is, our league is so good, it's so tight, and there's no guaranteed win against anyone, and you got to bring your best day in and day out. So for me, it really would come down to workload and managing that workload for our goalies.
Heading into this season, the play of Darcy Kuemper was one of the big question marks that we had identified, just as like a storyline. Like how good will Darcy Kuemper be? That's going to go a long way towards determining how good the team is. Now, he wound up being a Vezina finalist, but even at his peak, just as a fan and as an observer, maybe I've lost the thread on what peak goaltending performance looks like, but I never felt like, oh, he's playing out of his mind. He's playing above his abilities. To me, he always just seemed like, yeah, that looks like Darcy Kuemper. And then you look at the numbers and you go, holy smokes, that Darcy Kemper's really good. I wouldn't have thought the numbers would be that good based on what I was watching. The reason I bring it up is just to say, heading into next season, what are the odds that he can replicate that? He's been a very good goaltender for, the bulk of his career. And certainly when he's had the opportunity to play a number of games, he's justified it. He played 50 regular season games last year. Do you expect a repeat performance? Maybe not a Vezina nod, but similar consistent play from him next season.
I would expect him to be. He's very consistent. I think that's where you say, I didn't get wowed by him. Obviously, he made some incredible saves and had some incredible games throughout the course of the year. But his ability to control and manage a game is outstanding. And older goalies, veteran goalies, generally, that's how they win games. Is they manage them. They know when to take a whistle. They control their rebounds a little bit better. You may notice a younger goalie who's maybe a little bit worked up, it's giving up a lot more rebounds, and pucks hit them kind of hard. It hits their block and it boom pops out to the slot. Whereas a veteran guy, they're much calmer. The puck comes to them and it hits them softly, and it's controlled. And you see that a lot in Darcy. That ability to do that. Also, his communication is outstanding. So there's a lot of great examples of him communicating with D. Let's say there's a backdoor option and he communicates and points and talks. And in that split second, that defenseman picks up that backdoor pass and the pass doesn't get through. So he has that poise. He has that commanding presence in there. So there's so many little things that he does in a game that you don't look at and be like, oh my God, that's spectacular. There are little things that maybe only hockey minds would pick up. To answer your question in terms of expectation, my expectation for him next year is to be the most focused player on the team. What that means in terms of his numbers, wins, Vezina, All-Star, whatever, that I don't know. My expectation is to be him to be the most focused player and one of the hardest working players on the team.
Is he, and this is just me revealing my goaltender ignorance. In my mind, goaltenders break into 2 categories. There's like the Dominik Hasek, where you go, okay, maybe his fundamentals weren't perfect, but he could make these ridiculous, slinky saves, as they're called. Or then there's a guy like, I guess, Carey Price would be an example, who's fundamentally sound, the ice water in the veins, economy of motion, all of that sort of rhetoric, which, if there's a slider moving, to either side of the spectrum, where does Darcy Kuemper fit on that spectrum?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would categorize it as you have play reading goalies, guys who read the game, they're kind of staying ahead of it. You have reactive goalies, guys who kind of wait and see, like puck goes here, oh, I got to get there. That's more of a Jonathan Quick had, obviously he was a great play reader and great competitor, but he was also reactive at times, and that was one of his strengths. So you have guys who read the game really well and guys who react to the game really well. And then you have just pure positional guys who just kind of they stay in their spot. That's a guy like Henrik Lundqvist. That's just very. But I would say Darcy is a good combination. He's very balanced in terms of play reading and positioning. He's a lot less reactive. He's a lot less like a Dominic Hasek.
Although there were at least one or two saves he made where he was diving across the. I mean, I saw a couple of them.
Yep, no, for sure. There's going to be times every goalie is put into that position, and that's where, that's where you gotta compete. That's we talk a lot about our goalies being good play readers, being good positionally, and then being able to compete. All three of those things combined.
Excellent. Well, Mike, I appreciate your time, and thanks for talking goalies with us. Listen, one of these days I'm going to sit you down and just have you teach me about the position, because I've been watching this game for 30 years. I feel like I know less about it today than when I started watching. But
it's always evolving. It's always changing. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting position in sports.
Yeah. Well, we will keep in touch with you in the off season, and I imagine we'll talk to you next year. Thanks very much.
Absolutely. Anytime. Take care.
All right. The 2024-25 season has concluded. We're here to do some evaluation of the season just finished. Here to help us talk about goaltending, Bill Ranford. How are you doing today, Bill?
Doing great. Thanks.
Obviously a pretty solid season for Kings goaltending, not just in Kings jerseys, but even down the pipeline. Hampton Slukynsky wins the national championship. Carter George makes his professional debut, gets his team into the playoffs. Erik Portillo wins his first National Hockey League game. There's a lot of big questions to ask, so I guess I'll just start with how do you evaluate success for guys that you can't look at their record and say, okay, well, he's a Vezina finalist or something like that.
Yeah, I mean it's tough to evaluate until they get to the top level, and but we're excited. This is the first time in a while that we've had 2 to 3 swings at some potential NHL goalies, and that just excites our group. The fact that you got a guy like Hampton Slukynsky that wins the USHL championships, goes into his first year of college hockey as a freshman, competing with the senior, and takes over the starting role late in the season and runs off a national championships. And then Carter George, for us is it's something that we're really excited about. Their team in Owen Sound, it was a tough season. They weren't a great team, but somehow he goes 12-5 down the stretch, averaging about 45 shots against the night, and gets his team into the playoffs. So you got to really tip your hat, and had a really good World Juniors, and then he gets the opportunity to come and work with our guys in Los Angeles, and gets a shutout in his first American Hockey League start, and then only gives up one in his second. So obviously we're excited about those two guys. And then, for Erik, I think if you ask him, he's probably a little disappointed with the way the season started and ended. He got a weird virus to start the season that really put him behind the 8 ball. But, his goals against and save percentage weren't great, but in typical fashion of Erik, he just loves to win hockey games, and he had a nice winning record until the unfortunate back injury at the end of the season. And, he's working his way through that, and we're just excited about, the future for those 3 guys.
For decades, the standard approach to goaltending was goaltending's voodoo. just leave the goaltender alone and he'll figure it out. And, I think we talked to, can't remember if it was Slukynsky or George, but one of them told us that like he'd never even had a goalie coach before he reached the level that he was at competitively. So it's hard to, I suppose, for somebody who doesn't know anything about goaltending, and I'm including myself in that category, it's hard for me to even ask questions about development because I don't understand the skills necessary to excel at it. But I do know that the LA Kings recently, within the last few years, have created a goaltending department, which you are the head of.
Yes.
So given all the success that the younger players have had, I can ask, sometimes a young player, like if it's a Kopitar or a Doughty comes in, they come in and they're just fully formed and they're ready to go. And you go, okay, well, how much did the development staff really have to do with Andrei Kopitar becoming Andrei Kopitar? Like you can take credit for it, but at some point he's just Andrei Kopitar. But when you watch Slukynsky and George and Portillo, are you seeing things that the goalie department worked on with them in their success?
Yeah, I mean, you got to tip your hat to them. Also, you got to give credit where credit's due, and all three individuals. There's obviously a pedigree of some sort with all three of them. We worked the oldest on down. Obviously, with Portillo, we saw something there. He was drafted by Buffalo and wasn't going to sign there, and we looked at of the potential college free agents that year. He was at the top of our list. Now, there was lots of his game that we liked, and there was lots of his game that we didn't like. And, I don't think he took the position all that serious until maybe the last year and a half of his college career, especially his last year. But still, he was a guy that was probably school first, hockey second early on, and the kind of flip-flop maybe down the stretch. But, here's a guy that was very, very talented, but not in very good shape and didn't understand about nutrition. And we get him into LA, and he started working with our nutritionists and really put himself in a better position to be successful. And then, the combination of working with Mike Buckley and Adam Brown and even Danny Tyrone, of our three goalie coaches, he started to work on his game and get more of a foundation and understand what his game should look like. So, that's the fortunate thing that when we're able to get our hands on guys, we want to help, kind of groom them, give them tools, but not create, a cookie cutter style goalie. With Hampton, we've had him for a couple of years now, but we really only get our hands on him at development camp. Mm-hmm. And then we just are able to go in and say hi and touch base with him during the season. But here's a guy that, in his USHL season, just right from the get-go was battling with a older goalie and took over down the stretch as starting goalie and won with Fargo. And the one thing I can say about Hampton is he just finds a way to win. And he goes into his freshman year as in college and with Western Michigan, and they were touted to be, a good team, but it was a little bit of a, tough summer for him because he originally was going to go to a different school, and then the coach left, and so he now was hitting all these different schools trying to decide where he wanted to go, and he ended up at Western Michigan, and obviously they had a very successful season, and he was a big part of it. And then with the young buck with Carter George, he's a guy that when we looked at him from the draft standpoint, he's a little bit undersized, but plays big, and that's what excited me about him and our group that with the amateur draft. Didn't think I thought he'd go higher, and we lucked out that we were able to grab him when we did. He's got a real complete package, and so for him, we're working on, when you have a junior goalie and you don't have your hands on him every day, you're trying to just instill good habits, getting him to understand what it's like to train like a pro and be a pro, and getting this opportunity at the end of the season for him to work with our nutritionists, to work with our strength and conditioning group, and then work with our goalie coaches was a real benefit because, the option we have for him, he's either in the NHL next year or back in junior. So I think this really set up well for us, for him to understand what it takes to play at the top level, and be able to go back and, it's important what he does in junior next year if he goes back, but also for him to understand you're getting yourself ready to be a pro. That's the most important thing. Train like a pro, act like a pro, and when you're on the ice, be a pro.
So that sort of answers the next question I was going to ask, which is for someone like me who I suppose I could watch all of their games if I wanted to, but that's an awful lot of junior and minor hockey and collegiate level hockey. So it's easy to just sort of look at the accolades and go, okay, national champion for Slukynsky and Carter George did this and Erik Portillo did that. But that's not really progress. Those are accolades and they're nice and they're great and they can indicate something. But what does progress look like for goaltenders who all sort of made a big splashy name for themselves at different points of the season?
Well, I think you want them to grow in the position, improve on tiny skills. For Erik, the big thing about Erik, he just wanted everything fast, and we had to kind of pull back on the reins with him. And he's all, everybody's about winning, but Erik is like, if it's a game or in practice, all he cares about is winning that game, and sometimes structure and technique goes out the door. And so we've really tried to instill a foundation for him, something for him to fall back on. And our reasoning behind that is we don't want our goalies to get into a scenario where they're up and down, big ups and big downs. And so we try and create a foundation that they're comfortable with, that get them to understand what their B+ to A game looks like, and try and maintain that as much as possible. With Hampton, obviously it's a little bit tougher. But anytime Danny was in there talking with him, just would do a little bit of video work and just explain some of the things maybe at the pro level that he has to understand to keep improving. And some of the things we talked about with him was traffic management, narrowing up his stance a little bit so they had a little bit more power, and so that's what's important. With Carter George, for him, it was understanding that with not as strong a team, the mental grind of there's going to be nights where it doesn't go well, and how do you bounce back? And I think what allowed him to be able to do that is he's already got a nice foundation. So now we're just looking at little tiny things for him to improve on, and then most importantly for him is probably off the ice. Getting stronger, getting that body ready to go for a very, very tenacious pro career.
Last one, and I'll let you get on with your day. I've got two younger sisters who are 7 years apart. And at various stages of their life, that 7-year gap has meant totally different things to, who they are and what stages. Like one of them is, going into her junior year of college, and the other one's married with a kid. So, right, it's totally different. Totally different. So Erik Portillo is 6 years older than Carter George, and Hampton Slukynsky is somewhere in between the two. How much of just the different kinds of people you are when you're those different ages goes into handling?
Well, I think there's a maturity factor that comes into play in all aspects. Obviously, Erik finished his college career, then goes into a pro career where you're not told when to do things. You have a lot of spare time. You're no longer going to school. So how do you manage that off time? So there's a lot of growing up that way. Then you have Hampton, who was in a billet situation in Fargo, then goes to school his first year. But he, the one thing that he was fortunate with is he joined his brother. His brother ended up transferring to Western Michigan with him also. So the two of them lived together. So he had the advantage of a little bit of an advantage of, some experience from his brother. And then, with Georgie, you're looking at a guy that's left home at a young age and billeting. And this year he switched billets. So that transition of going in with a different family, leaving your team for a good month to go to World Juniors and then come back and have to get back in the swing of things. So it's all the maturing that these guys go through. But the reality of it is each man, because they are becoming men, has their own journey and how they deal with it. And it's our job to try and help them manage it the best we can.
I wasn't planning on asking this, but it had never actually occurred to me before you just said it. So for anybody listening who doesn't know, a billet is when a kid goes and is sent to live with another family when they're playing, junior sports. When a player goes to the World Juniors and leaves a billet family, is it just 25, 18 to 20-year-old kids suddenly tossed in a hotel with no adults? I mean, not no adult supervision, but coaches,
Yeah, that's
okay.
That's what it is. I mean,
okay.
But the players are used to, because they go on the road and they go into a hotel situation. So that sort of thing's not new to them. A lot of these guys, you have to understand that, especially the top end kids, have done this before. Like Carter George did both the pre U18 and then the post U18 last year. So he's been in that setting. You've got Hampton that's done the USA Hockey different events, so they're used to doing that. But it's a whole new different group of kids each time. So it's that adjustment to trying to find a buddy to hang out with, whether it's your roommate or guys that from the particular league you play in, or just meeting somebody that you just seem to get along with and latch on that way. So it's life skills that these kids learn at a very young age. Like I left home at 16 and I turned pro at 18. So all of a sudden I go from at 16 living with a billet family to open up a bank account, having to pay bills, stuff that I never, insurance, stuff that I never ever really had to worry about. So these are some of the roadblocks that these kids have to go through, and they are kids a lot of times when they do turn pro. So it's our job, as our development team and as our goalie department to help these guys out.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining me, Bill. Hopefully the LA Kings goaltending pipeline will have another year of progress next season, and we'll talk to you again.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it.